I'm really delighted that Scotland has decided to have this conference on climate change and human rights, the impact of climate justice in Scotland. And I commend the Scottish Government, the Scottish Human Rights Commission, the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency and BTCV Scotland. I really wish that I could be there with you in person and share the panel with my friend Alan Miller, but at least I can join you in this way. And it is important, the issues that you have decided to discuss today. First of all, the connection between climate change and human rights. That connection is very real. I heard it directly recently at a climate change hearing organised by Oxfam in Cape Town, South Africa. I listened to 5 climate witnesses tell their stories. Constance from Uganda talked about drought and flooding, no seasons anymore, and the impact, the terrible devastation in their village, the displacement, the children are out of school, the impacts on food, etc. A poor farmer from northern Kenya, where there has been extensive drought, talked about losing almost all his cattle and unable to feed his family. And each of them, when I asked the question, was this just a bad weather period? They said no. They know the weather in villages for over 200 years, and this is unprecedented, and it's getting worse. So the image we have to have now of climate change is not so much the icon of the polar bear and the glaciers melting. I have nothing against polar bears, but that seems to distance us. That is really what it's about, that human rights are being negatively affected in the poorest communities in the world. And yet human rights also can be a very positive framework for the UNFCCC and for the fleshing out of what we mean by equity and common but differentiated responsibilities. So what do we mean then by climate justice? It's an evolving concept and it's used in different ways as yet, but some of us are trying to focus in particular on the injustice of the fact that the greenhouse gas emissions come from the lifestyles which we have chosen in the modern Scotland, the modern Ireland, the United States, Korea, etc., over decades now, and they have led to this global warming. The whole of Africa is responsible for less than 3% of these emissions, and I understand the poorest 50 countries, which are the most affected, but less than 1%. So there's an injustice of causation, and the way in which I think we need to address the next concept of climate justice is the right of the poorest to development. We recognise the Millennium Development Goals. The right to development at the moment would be a carbon development, and if everybody of the billions at the bottom of the pyramid exercise that right, we would have no safe world after 2050. So it's in our interests as part of climate justice to ensure the transfer of green technologies and a huge adaptation fund that helps those poor farmers and communities with better seeds, with the possibility of different techniques to help them to cope with these weather changes and to provide food security. So that's the other element. And in the end, the poor communities, if they have solar lighting, if they have alternative wind, hydro, thermal and other forms of energy, will be part of the solution, because they'll be mitigating by 2050 in the same way that will help secure our world. And finally, I would say that we need to get these voices across in Copenhagen itself. We have the international conference, COP15 as it's called. I'll be there, as many others will be there, urging that it must become more human-centred. We need much more radical approaches to mitigation if we're to have a safe world by 2050. We need a big adaptation fund and a commitment that that is in addition to development aid. It mustn't be a moving around of pots of money. It must be real new money for adaptation and a new commitment to the transfer of green technologies. And I believe that we can have a new paradigm of development that's more respectful, that recognises the interconnection. We need to be interconnected with the poorest at the moment, because if we're not, then their exercise of a carbon right to development will bring us above the 2 degrees centigrade and the 450 parts per million, and we will not have a safe world. It gets very personal for me when I look at my 4 grandchildren who will be in their 40s in 2050. And I ask, will they have a safe world? So I must commend again Scotland for your focus on climate justice. I hope that your voice will be heard loudly in Copenhagen, joining with all the other voices, urging a people-centred, human-centred approach to this incredible challenge to all of our futures. So enjoy the conference, and I wish I was there. Thank you.